this episode, we are going to be talking about spooky movies, obviously being October and what have you. Brock and I both chose 5, but I think over the 2 weeks when we haven't been recording, the elephant in the theater has been Don't Worry, Darling. Brock just wrote some number of words out on whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. You got and read those as well. But yeah, give me your take. So when I saw this, and you saw it before me, as I said, I think we have to discuss this movie, just because clearly it's part of the zeitgeist, and also it is a thing that is trying to do something, and it does it so very poorly. I haven't seen a movie this poorly executed in I don't know how long.
Yeah, it is part of the popular discourse and the popular discussion, and I really wanted to like this film. It has Florence Pugh in it. It has Florence Pugh in it, but it has Chris Pine in it. It's directed by Olivia Wilde, whose work I want to like. Yeah. So I mean, I was like, when I first saw the trailer, I think it was at Men. When I went to see Men, it was the trailer for Men, and I was like, oh, this will be great. This looks really cool. And yeah, Florence Pugh, Chris Pine, Harry Styles. I was interested to see what he did, and I hated it. Hate is a strong word.
No, you're right. When you should say that, you absolutely should hate that. And let me say to our listener and sirs, maybe possibly, that if you have not seen Don't Worry, Darling, or any of the movies we're going to talk about today on the podcast, which probably goes without saying, all the movies we talk about here, period, we're going to spoil them. I mean, I don't think how we can talk about this without spoiling it. No. So I'm going to go ahead and say, if you haven't seen Don't Worry, Darling, skip ahead, and there'll be more discourse on things you can listen to, and then come back and listen to it when you have seen it, and when you've hated it as well.
Yeah, but if you don't know this, if you haven't had this movie spoiled for you, like, right, are you living under a rock? Is kind of the question.
Well, and they almost did it themselves, right? Here's the thing, and again, not to jump ahead of you, but
it's okay.
Like them tipping their hands where Olivia Wilde is saying, well, Chris Pine is clearly this Jordan Peterson-esque. Okay, that is a huge spoiler to this movie. You go in thinking this is Lost, Stepford Wives, right. 1,000 Twilight Zone, 1,000 different things that are better than this thing that you're going to watch.
Right.
But it is executed for the first, I'm going to say 70, 75 minutes really, really well. And again, a lot of that is on Florence Pugh's shoulders, right? And the set dressing for sure, but she is putting in a performance where you are invested. You want to know her story. You want to protect her in the ways you're supposed to, and again, you're rooting for her, right? And if that all comes from, I don't think that comes from her. All of it comes from her and her carrying the script 100%.
Well, her character is not that complex.
Right.
And none of the characters are. So you do want to know more about her. You want to follow her. You want to dig into her story. I mean, this is one of those something's not quite right here films.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like, oh, okay, tell me more. Let's find out. But it's never creepy enough. It never digs in. When it gives little flashes of when Florence Pugh's cleaning the windows, the glass wall, right? And it squeezes in on her. You're like, could you be any more kind of obvious with your metaphor here? That's where, I don't know. I think I gave it an hour. After an hour, I was like, I'm not into this. I'm not. It looks pretty, and I'm interested in her acting,
right,
but nothing else is carrying me. I don't care about Harry Styles' character. I'm interested in these other characters because they don't fucking exist.
Right.
I mean, the way that they're written, they don't exist. They're nothing. Yeah, and they could be so interesting.
And I think that's the problem I have with this movie, is that once you get to the ultimate reveal, which comes with about 30 minutes left, which either should have happened a lot sooner or a lot later.
Right.
It should have like if you, and to contrast it with something like Alex Garland's Men, which, and again, I don't like being in the position of being saying that a white male director told this story better than Olivia Wilde did. But he does, and again, that's a little maybe it's a little bit of a disservice to the community. But just he does this so much better. And again, I'm not saying that Men is a perfect movie.
No,
but it's open for interpretation enough that when you walk out of that movie, at least you're talking about it. When I walked out of Don't Worry, Darling, I was sitting there going, I get what they were trying to say, but in the way that they were trying to say it, none of it makes sense whatsoever.
No.
And it belittles and belies their entire point the way that they actually told it.
Right. Also, I think it's kind of, I don't think it goes nearly far enough. I think the basic message comes down to men want to keep women in the 50s. And I'm like, fuck off. Like, okay, of course, right? But seriously, that's it. And that's all you're going to dig into. I mean, we can talk about the sort of banality of evil in these kinds of ideas, but to not make it more nefarious than that, to not really dig into, okay, maybe that's it. Maybe it's as puny of an idea as that, but that's still bad enough. Dig into that more and give me a more complex Jordan Peterson, oh, he has tears now. Sorry, did you see him cry? Because also the other thing that really pissed me off, this is strong coming from like a white dude, something that really it did irk me was, Olivia Wilde talking about all the female sexual pleasure in this film, and she's going out talking about this,
and I'm showing something.
And I'm like, right, this is kind of radical and revolutionary, and like men don't come in this film. And it's like, well, no, because they use sex to shut women up. Right. I'm like, so you're proud of this? Like, what? Well, I did not understand that her talking about that.
It goes to the point that I don't think that any of the analysis of what they thought they were trying to go beyond was, hey, here's a thing that's bad in the news. Let's use that as our big boogeyman. Okay, you've got incels. Okay, fine. Let's dig into that. But no, all you want to do is show them, and now it's one woman's plight, and a plight that once you ultimately uncover, and it doesn't make any sense.
No,
it like the big reveal of Harry Styles has drugged and imprisoned his doctor wife in a virtual reality world, and that he has to go off each day to make money to be able to pay for this virtual reality world to keep her subjugated to him, because he's afraid that she's going to realize that he's a piece of shit and that eventually she's going to leave him. Like, it's so insulting on so many levels. And also, I know we've had the conversation off mic, but like, and again, I'm not advocating for Shia LaBeouf, but Harry Styles is terrible in this role. He brings nothing to the table. And again, I don't know if he's a good actor or not, but this role being directed by his lover does not serve him at all.
No.
And again, he's the Shia LaBeouf type. And again, keeping all the things about Shia LaBeouf on the other side of it.
Because he is a piece of shit.
Right. And he is foreboding and
menacing.
Right. Yeah. There's something to that. Whereas if you had have cast, I forget the lead actor's name in Men, but like someone like that, the intent would be that, again, there should be, Florence Pugh at no point in her relationship that we're shown with Harry Styles is anything but overly loving. She's a little frustrated, but again, just because she's worked along a double shift and he's, not cleaned up around that. It's, again, it's these simplistic things. But again, and ultimately I'm going back to like, when I walked out of the theater, I'm like, okay, Chris Pine is Jordan Peterson. But really, he's not, because he's trying to make money and profit off these incels. Say what you will about Jordan Peterson, that's not who that guy is. Right. He's not. I mean, he's using it to prop his own ego up. But again, and I don't want to get into that really. But so Chris Pine has tied himself to this scientist who's developed this world-changing technology, and what we're going to use it for is to foster MAGA type environment for this 50s, going back to the 50s environment, to keep women in their place and to allow men who are normally emasculated in the real world to be able to have a very brief respite in time where these women that they don't feel like they should or would be able to get in the real world then are at their disposal. But then of course, mental breaks start to happen. Again, there is a interesting story here. There's a lot to uncover that they do nothing with it. Nothing. I mean, really nothing about identity. It's basically like incels. They suck, man.
Right. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And like, but we never see how they get there either. What I mean is we never see how Harry Styles' character goes from kind of sad sack, I can't get a good job to take care of you, to I will just keep you imprisoned, but you have to go out and work to keep up the payments for the virtual. I don't get like,
and these guys,
that's a big jump.
These guys aren't incels either. This is not what they are. They're just men who want to, again, the Stepford Wives, and again, I know we had this conversation as well. This movie really shows its hand so quickly, and also then shows its influences to movies that are just so much better. Even The Stepford Wife, which is not a great movie, is better than this. Logan's Run, Westworld, all of these things that they're trying to show, Get Out. I mean, these are all a million times better than this movie. And that's the thing too, is that I wanted to like it, and when I sat there the first hour, I was like, okay, maybe I will, and then no, okay, yeah, absolutely, all of it fell apart.
Yeah, that was the other thing that got me, was it's clearly showing its hand on influences, but to its detriment, all I think about is those influences, right? I don't think about how it disappears and sort of then reemerges as something new, but it's...
Well, and that's the thing too, like, again, and we could argue this back and forth all day long. Like, you don't set it in mid-century United States if you don't want it to be compared to the Stepford Wives.
Right.
You don't need to either. You could have said it in Midwestern,
it wouldn't have mattered, right? It wouldn't have mattered where you put it because of what you're trying to convey. You can do that.
And then don't tie it into technology. There's this really shitty John Travolta, Ari Gross film called The Professionals, or I forget exactly what it's called. It's The Pretend, I don't know, where they play this rock and roll group, but they end up being this 1950s town. Like the Russian mob has set it up inside of Russia. Not mob. The Russian government set it up in Russia, but everyone thinks they're in the United States. It's this whole we're breeding communism. It's a terrible movie. But I mean, again, just to that point, you don't have to have this as be 1950s where women will be. I mean, look, the better commentary, women that are voting against their own self-interest, like, again, like there's so much to unpeel here and unpack and like actually talk about, and you do nothing with it.
And some of these characters that we never, I mean, again, something else that I thought was frankly kind of insulting was Kiki Lane's character, who's really the only character of color who is like a sacrificial lamb.
The only female character of color. Right?
Okay, true. Yeah, the only female character of color. And she becomes the sacrificial lamb so that Florence Pugh can be sort of like the white savior to...
Well, and not only that, but her, and again, you don't say anything about it. You don't give any sort of heaviness to it. So, but her exit from the screen is a suicide, which then speaks really poorly about actually what you're trying to say as well.
Right.
It's crazy.
There's just all these questions of like, why did you make that choice? And you clearly made that choice. And then to talk about these things afterwards, like they're empowering.
Right. To stand up on your soapbox and talk about how, we showed Harry Styles going down on Florence Pugh, and that, that's clearly we're pro women. I mean, that means something, right?
Right. And I'm not calling Olivia Wilde anti-woman. I just think that like these comments are like misguided. But but it's basically like second wave feminism. It's sort of what she's referencing.
Yeah.
It's no more advanced than that.
It's an ivory tower looked down upon a really, a real
we
issue.
We can have jobs too.
So we're in October.
Yes, and it's spooky season.
And scary movies are abound. And here's what we're here to do. So Brock and I both brought 5 movies to the table, and we're going to talk about 5 of them today. We'll put those in the show notes so you can go out and see them before we talk about them. Especially if you don't want to have them spoiled for you, or if you want to be able to stream them, that sort of thing. We'll put that out in the show notes. So we're going to do a grab bag. Brock brought 5, I brought 5, and then we're just going to talk about them. Like I said, and we'll do 5. We'll do 5 next week as well. And then we've got a whole slate of things to talk about. Real quick before we get started, one of the movies we're going to be talking about is Let the Right One In, which will be showing at Stage West in Fort Worth for the Fort Worth Film Club on October 26th. 6th, that's correct. Yes, I was going to say 28, but that's not right. 26th, Wednesday the 26th, show starts at 7. Pre-show starts at 7, show starts at 7:30. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we'd love to see you out there. All right, let's get started. So we've got a set of pieces of paper, and we're just going to, I'm assuming you shuffled these before I got here.
So I shuffled them. I wrote the name of each movie on there. I didn't have a hat.
No, that's fine. I'm going to take one, and then we'll just round robin.
Perfect.
All right. The first movie we're going to pick here, and I'm just, I don't know why I'm shuffling like it actually matters, but the first movie is, perfect. This leads right into my fucking, Don't Worry, Darling.
Okay, this is House of Darkness, the new Neil LaBute film starring Kate Bosworth and Justin Long.
Yeah.
Do you want to give the premise of the film?
It's very simple. It is a gentleman picks up a woman at a bar.
Gentleman's being kind.
Right. A male picks up a woman at a bar. They head back to her gothic mansion out in a a who knows what kind of wooded, scary area. And then the typical dance between man and woman happens, and lies are abound, and people are trying to figure one another out. And it turns out, obviously, that the castle and the woman have secrets, as well as Justin Long does as well. But her secrets tend to be a little bit more dangerous and a little bit more confusing. And so it's a typical. It's so yeah. I mean, it is a 30-minute Tales from the Crypt or a 15-minute Tales from the Crypt segment that's drawn out to an hour and 30 and change. It's been done a million times better in a million different movies. Go watch Vampires, the YERS movie. Go watch Daughters of Darkness. Watch any sort of British horror from the 70s where there's psychosexual elements to it.
You didn't like this. You didn't like this film.
I was on the fence. No.
But this is interesting because it's gotten actually like really good reviews.
Has it?
Yes. From real.
I can't imagine how.
RogerDebert.com gave it 3 stars.
What did they have to say? I'm gonna have to go read it because
here's one of the other things, but kind of the opposite of what you said.
Oh, really?
So one thing it did, and I saw some other critics do this too, was that it compared it more favorably to Promising Young Woman.
No. In fact, I saw that and was thinking, that movie kicked ass. This movie is god-awful.
So people said the opposite.
They didn't like Promising Young Woman?
Yeah. No, they said that this handled kind of that idea better. But back to what you said about a man sort of tackling this idea better than a woman. I don't know that I'd go that far, right? But sort of how we talked about Men and Don't Worry, Darling.
Right.
Critics were doing the same thing with House of Darkness and Promising Young Woman, which I found interesting. And I mean, I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of Promising Young Woman because I fucking hated the ending of that movie.
Right.
But
I thought, and again, we're not going to talk about the movie we're actually supposed to be talking about. I thought Carrie and Bo Burnham were really good. I thought that their dynamic was good. Look, Promising Young Woman, the ending was so heavy-handed. Up until that point, though, I thought that her revenge pieces were actually really well done, especially the one on Alison Brie. I liked the devastation that it showed and that happened to her and her family and to her friend's family. And I liked the anger, and I liked this idea of what she was trying to accomplish, which was, I'm going to lure these men, but I'm going to give them the opportunity to be something that may flip things around, right? And may be able to save themselves.
Okay, but this is interesting at how it then connects back to House of Darkness. Because, Kate Bosworth's character, Mina, right? I mean, and like the name, pretty much know where we're going at that point. But she gives him all the space to sort of be honest, come clean.
Sure.
This is also a Neil LaBute film, and so there are some weird dialogue things that go on, some forced dialogue.
I mean, ultimately, so just to kind of lay the entire story out, they come back to the house. If you haven't seen it, they come back to the house, and then more and more things get revealed. Justin Long's character comes off, and again, I'm maybe exposing myself here, he comes off as a jerk, and he's obviously duplicitous in some sense. We're not 100% sure. But what is revealed to us is that Kate Bosworth has 2 sisters. They were brutally raped and abused in the past, and now that they're kind of part of this undead supernatural thing. Yeah. And they're taking revenge on these types of men, and they've done so throughout history.
Right.
That's all fine and good. Again, although
it's not a new story, right?
It's not a new story, and I would also say that by the time that we get to someone like Justin Long, if we're exacting death revenge on this guy, then maybe our story isn't what we're trying to maybe our message isn't what we're trying to convey here,
right?
Because all the trespasses that Justin Long displays in this movie, none of them are worthy of. They're worthy of a kick in the balls, maybe. Sure. They're not worthy of getting your neck ripped out.
Sure.
And so to that end, I don't know what we're truly trying to say here.
And I think that that's exactly what LaBute is trying to say through kind of a female cipher, which is maybe as men, we don't understand or feel the full weight of microaggressions or micro toxicity and masculinity. Now, because of course, I think like on the surface, and I also think on the surface, you're like, okay, does this warrant like death? Does a kind of a white liar trying to get this woman into bed in a way that is not forceful? Does this warrant? Because he never forces himself on her. I mean, he makes allusions and he says things, right? But he never, and he's creepy, sure.
Right, he's crass.
But he never physically sort of forces or assaults in any way. So you're kind of like, is this really worthy of death? And so I think LaBute is sort of taking it over the top on purpose.
And horror tropes do that, right? There's always people who find themselves in situations that they could have if they'd just been straight, if they'd just been truthful, if they had just done the right thing, that small, tiny right thing, they wouldn't have found themselves at the bottom of Crystal Lake. Sure.
Right.
So, but LaBute does not have the subtlety for horror. And this is where, again,
he just doesn't have subtlety, right?
No, you're absolutely right. And this is my struggle with him, because in 1997, 1999, I was a huge LaBute fan.
Right.
I mean, like coming off of In the Company of Men and Your Friends and Neighbors, I'm thinking this is a guy who's tapped into this Gen X malaise and like sexual dynamic and just this anger of coming across, this anger of coming out of the baby boomer generation where you're not going to be doing bad. I mean, this whole generational anger of not having any sort of great war. We're just in this kind of no great ups and no great downs. We're just we just skirt through life. And then there's these people that exist in his world that push against that and use that and do so with such great ugliness and force that it was really, I think those two movies and going, I didn't love Possession, but then The Shape of Things, which kind of is starting to taper down, were a great trilogy of just kind of gross fuck you films. I mean, and it's weird because like they clearly, those movies want you to take joy in watching them until they pull the rug out from underneath you. Right.
Although I thought like In the Company of Men was him saying like, yeah, men suck. I mean, just
absolutely.
like
on all levels,
right? From the get-go, right? And like, I'm going to show you how bad like some people can be, but then also how it's going to really destroy this other person as well, like this other man as well.
I felt LaBute was going to be a kind of a scorched earth Mehmet. It obviously came from the same playwright background.
That works.
And then once he hit Wicker Man and completely misunderstood that film. And again, I think to his defense of remaking Wicker Man has an elevated status in folk horror, maybe overly so. If you can't rein in Nicolas Cage and pull in a performance that's constrained, and it's just going to seem ridiculous. It's going to be ridiculous, Cage, and that's the problem. And then from there, he never recovered. And I don't think he has anything to say here. I think what he has to say is the same sort of "Don't worry, darling" take on it. And what's crazy is that both Kate Bosworth and Justin Long were in another movie that came out on the exact same day of House of Darkness. It hit theaters. It was called Barbarian, where Justin Long plays a heightened version of this exact same character, where you do feel like, and the back and forth and the tonal shifts of his character play so well that when you compare it to this one, I don't think Justin Long is a leading man at all. I don't think he can carry a film.
No.
I like him in his comedies. I think he's a great comedic actor. And I think he's great in the where he shows up in those types of movies, Idiocracy, those types of films.
Apple.
Right. Although
not anymore.
But people should know Hodgman more than they know.
That's true. That's true.
More than they know Justin Long out of it. And I don't. This is kind of the same problem I had with Drag Me to Hell, is that I think Justin Long kind of diminishes that movie as well. I don't buy him. He's this everyday guy, but he always comes off as creepy. He always comes off as like
he's always that guy. Toast. He's always that guy. Yeah. He's always the guy from Barbarian. He's always the guy from House of Darkness. I mean, that's who he is.
Right.
I can't remember. Did he play a similar character in Drag Me to Hell? I'm trying to remember. He was like the boyfriend,
he was the
right?
boyfriend, right? So he wasn't creepy. He was supportive.
Yeah, he was. But I just don't like buy him in those roles anyway, right? I mean, I don't really buy him as being supportive. Yeah.
And again, I don't know. Like, there's the time for me to be excited about a Neil LaBute movie. Like when you picked this one out, and it's like, hey, it's new Neil LaBute. I had no idea he was doing one, and that, like I said, 20 some odd years ago would have seemed unfathomable to me, because I was just like, oh, this guy is going to be the next voice of our cinema, and to an extent that he's going to be writing dialogue that we're going to be quoting, and it just did not happen.
Okay, next film is awesome, Anguish. Okay, so I fucking love this film. This was
really this was the one I was saying I was on the fence for. Man. I didn't know. So there's two that I picked out. I won't spoil the other one, but obviously I'm sure you know what it is. This one This one, because I know you don't tend to veer towards kind of schlocky movies. Like this one kind of is.
This is true. I'm not a huge like B-movie fan. I'm not a big kind of grindhouse schlocky. Although I can appreciate sort of what they're doing or why they're entertaining. But no, you're right. I don't really go towards that. But here's what I do. Here's what I do dig: playing with structure. I love playing with structure. I love films that do something different. I also love films like this that don't take themselves too seriously, right? And Michael Lerner's in this?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck, right? I was like, oh my God. So
do you know who was supposed to be Zelda Rubinstein?
No.
Betty Davis. She couldn't do it because of the conflict, but Betty Davis was supposed to be the Zelda Rubinstein character.
But she was pretty. Zelda Rubinstein was perfect. Fantastic.
Perfect in this. And once she does it, I don't think you could. Once Zelda puts her mark on a,
you can't see anyone else doing it.
So you want to describe the plot of Anguish as best you can?
As best I can. So Michael Lerner is the son of Zelda Rubinstein, and the film opens. They're in their house, and this is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be in New York? Is it supposed to be a city? I can never.
Hard to say.
I couldn't quite tell. But so they're in their house, right? Michael Lerner is Zelda Rubinstein's adult son, and they have a bowl full of snails, right? A fish bowl full of snails. And Michael Lerner, he is tending to his pigeons that he keeps inside, and one escapes, and anyway, he has to catch it. That's the opening sort of scene. It turns out Michael Lerner is an orderly at an optometrist, some sort of ophthalmologist. Like a big time eye doctor, right? And he's the orderly, and he's there to sort of, help. And he's putting contacts into a woman patient's eyes. She's well-to-do, upper class, snooty, and the contacts hurt her eyes, and she yells at him, and he's sad and sorry. And this is like the inciting incident of the film, because the mother finds out, and the mother decides that this woman needs to be punished. And so she hypnotizes Michael Lerner, and he goes and visits that patient's house and gives her new contacts, and she's very thankful, and everything is fine until he cuts her eyeballs out. And then he cuts the eyeballs out of her husband, boyfriend, whoever else is there. And so then he goes back home, right? And Zelda Rubinstein tells him that they're all going to sort of pay, right? They're all going to pay.
Right. So between this time, but while he's at her house, she gets a call from the doctor basically saying he's no longer welcome there. He's no longer working there. And we're giving some sort of inclination that Zelda Rubinstein has been financing or has some sort of patronage. Been a factor to this optometry or ophthalmology school.
Eye doctor.
Right. You know how you do. You know how people give money to
just like I'm going to finance your eye doctor business. Right. So the doctor or the office calls is like, he can't come back. He's like creeping people out and stuff. And then she sort of, what would you say, sort of enacts this like revenge plot.
Right. Where
further hypnosis.
Where Lerner has to take all the eyes.
All the eyes. And I forget, he goes somewhere. Is it then that we...
So yes, then he goes to the movie theater.
Yeah. And then we sort of...
Yes. And then
zoom out.
And then as an audience, we zoom out one level and we find out that we've been watching people watching a movie called The Mommy.
The Mommy at this movie theater. And these two girls, two teenage girls, two friends, one starts freaking out. One gets really sort of panics, having this like anxiety attack and is almost like sharing in this experience with Michael Lerner's
right,
character.
And on the screen, there's a bunch of hypnotic images, like a spinning wheel, and it gets blurry, and it's
right. So you've got Zelda Rubinstein's voice kind of over, like telling Michael Lerner to keep going or don't stop, take them all, and so pulls out. We're watching people watch this film. One girl has a panic attack, and she keeps watching one particular character in the audience. And then
you can spoil it at this point.
That member of the audience then starts to perpetrate his own series of killings within the theater, talking to the mommy, right? Talking to Zelda Rubinstein's character, Alice, right? I think is her name. Yeah. And so this guy goes on this killing spree in a theater, which I thought
it's a cool concept.
This has happened before.
Right.
Like in real life, right? But yes, it's also this like super meta like concept. The cops finally get there. Our two teenage characters kind of end up being heroes in a sense. Yes. The one is taken hostage. The one gets out and tracks someone down to get a phone call. The cops come. The SWAT team comes, while at the same time the same thing is happening
Right. So Michael Lerner's watching a movie he's watching The Lost World, not the Jurassic Park, but the original.
But the original black and white. Yeah.
He's in the theater while we're doing all of this, and while people are getting more and more uncomfortable in the movie theater that they're watching the actual movie. I know it gets confusing here. Michael Lerner is cutting out eyeballs and slitting throats all throughout the theater.
Yeah, it's at the same theater. I was going to say he doesn't go to another theater. Okay,
no, the same movie's still going on.
Right.
And then yes, while the cops come to the theater that we're watching, the cops also come to the theater that the people where they're watching are watching.
Right.
But it turns out that one of the patrons that's been watching the mommy has come back over and over and over again to see the mommy and has become so enamored and so hypnotized by that movie that he believes that he's Michael Lerner's character and starts taking on. And then as the denouement happens the one of the girls who was watching the movie has been so taken by it that she also thinks that Michael Lerner's character is real, and that when he can reach through the screen and stabs her in the eye.
Right. So the cops on the mommy movie kill Michael Lerner and Alice. Kill Alice.
They kill Alice accidentally.
Right. And then the cops in the other theater kill the killer who's holding the one girl hostage. And then, she's so sort of wrapped up in this whole idea that she watches as Michael Lerner's character reaches down from the screen and stabs her in the eye. Oh, okay. The cops rescue everybody. They take the one girl to the hospital, right? They kind of, she needs rest. She's like, right. And so like the doctors and the nurses make her friends and her parents leave, and she's trying to rest. And then who comes in dressed as an orderly but Michael Lerner?
Yes.
And then he says, "Oh, don't worry.
I'm not even real.
I'm just in your imagination." and she tries to scream. She can't scream. Finally, a scream comes out as the camera does this like extreme close up, like into her mouth, and it goes black. And what do we see? Another fucking movie screen,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And we're watching another audience watch this film. That was a film within a film. So we're watching a film within a film within a film. I love structure. It's so inventive. And so, I mean, look, there are places where like you can see things held together with duct tape and stuff, but it's so inventive and so.
I find it interesting that this movie is not more well known.
Well, so did I. I was like, how did I not know about this like beforehand? And
I don't know, like the director.
What's his name?
Is Biggest Luna,
okay.
Who directed Hamon, which introduced the world to Javier Bardem.
Right.
It was Banderas. It was Banderas and Penelope Cruz, not Javier. Or was it Javier Bardem?
No, it was Javier Bardem.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wrote it down.
Yeah.
And this is the only movie that he actually wrote and directed. But yeah, it's weird that it's just that, I mean, this construct's just odd. And maybe it's because it came from a Spanish director and it came out in a time where these types of direct-to-video movies, and I'm sure this wasn't direct-to-video, but it came out from a Spanish director. It probably didn't get a huge release. Probably sat on, video shelves and people picked it up. But like, it's odd to me that post Poltergeist, when Zelda Rubinstein is at her height, that this was not a film that people really championed. And because it is, out of all the schlocky things, it is so inventive. It is so, you've never seen anything like this. And again, yes, the mommy, the movie that they're all watching, is silly and over the top, and is exactly the movie you think you're going to get when you pick up the box.
Right.
Like if it had just gone on, you'd be like, okay, well that was that thing. And some guys just cutting it. But there's some inventive like gore scenes. I mean, there's a scalpel going into an eyeball that's really effective and well done.
It's like a surgery. I mean, it's an actual surgical procedure, and
it's creepy.
And it's not a bloody scene, but it is a creepy scene just to watch the scalpel go like right under the surface there of. Okay. and Michael Lerner, the next year would be in 8 Men Out. Right.
Yeah.
And when was Barton? Because he was in Barton Fink too, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure when. This was 87, I think this movie came out. So Barton Fink would have been, I want to say Barton Fink was a little bit later than that, like 92, something along those lines.
But this guy was someone who like you recognize immediately. Even if you don't know his name, you're like, oh, I know him from. He's definitely that guy, right? You're just like, oh, he's that guy from this film. Maybe not a huge part, but he's in this, and you remember him, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it is surprising that it's not more well known, that it wasn't probably bigger at the time, because you're just like, what the fuck? This is great. this is great.
Yeah, and it is really a good example. And like you said, like, it's just so inventive, and it's just a good example of these types of movies that I can see where you would just dismiss it after the first 15 minutes, but you can't have said you've seen anything like it after you get through that, though.
No, and even like the first 15 minutes is so wild and so just like bizarre. You're like, okay, I'll see where this goes. Like, like these people are weird. Okay, let's watch. I mean, this is the cool thing. I mean, I'm not a huge horror fan, right? I mean, but what I like is that, and I actually like hate the term genre too, but that's a different discussion. But what I like about horror films and what I like about genre films is they take the permission to play, right? They take the permission to try something new. So even like Neil LaBute's trying something new. It's almost like a stage play in this kind
he's
of
trying something.
Well, I said okay, for him is what I mean. Like he's trying something, right? But this idea of being able to sort of play with structure, to try something different, and it's almost like you get a free pass. Right? Because if this were a more like serious movie,
yeah, they'd never let you do this.
Right.
They'd never let you do this.
I mean, this is not. I mean, I'm trying to think like one of the few movies that Memento is I think a serious movie that tried something different with structure. Right. This is more complex than that too.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. It's so meta. It was so meta when meta wasn't even a term that it's
right. Nobody was using because I mean, think about how many years later, 10 years later, Scream came out, which again was something very postmodern at that time.
Yeah,
I think that's what was kind of being, it's such a postmodern meta commentary on horror films.
Craven started doing it with New Nightmare. So when New Nightmare came, and again, it wasn't to the extent that because then when he met up with Kevin Williamson, and that was really
what got smarter. I mean,
right.
Dawson's Creek will do that.
And there was no other way. There was no other place for horror to go at the time.
Yeah,
you were stuck. Because all of the big bads were gone. They weren't making money at the box office anymore, and they were being. I mean, look, they were still relevant to the extent of like, okay, you can, I guess, say that all of them, Jason was completely gone. Freddy was completely gone. Michael was completely gone because Kevin Williamson resurrects Michael as well.
Right.
Child's Play at that point starts to go off into its own meta commentary and also its own like John Waters really bizarre-esque kind of route, which is great. I mean, but there were no like huge stars that brought people in. So you really at that point you were J-horror. You were J-horror remakes, and then that was really about it.
Right.
And then so I mean I know Craven is seen as like the godfather of horror to a certain extent anyway, but I don't think he gets credit for reinventing and inventing it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But highly recommend going and see Anguish.
It's a trip.
There's a planned remake for this year.
Oh, that's right. I saw that.
There was a botched one in 2009, and so we'll see if it gets off the ground. I'm interested to see what they do with it, but the original is so much fun and deserves more attention than it gets.
Yeah, it is so fun. Okay.
All right, so it's my turn?
Yeah.
All right, so movie number 3 is... Oh, my favorite. God Told Me To.
Oh, my God. Okay, all right.
The Larry Cohen 1976 horror film, God Told Me To.
Go for it. Take it away. I just want to say two things first. Sandy Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Kaufman.
The very first screen presence of Andy Kaufman. on what had to have been a faux parade without any sort of permits whatsoever.
The whole movie, right? I mean, everything was
Cohen was never like Cohen. So just to step forward before I step back. No, and this was going to be one of my points is that I don't know how familiar you are with Larry Cohen's filmography. If you haven't seen, and again, I know this may not be your type of film, but I would watch Q, the Winged Serpent with Michael Moriarty. It's Alive. There's a few other ones that he did later in his career too. I'm a huge fan of his movies and just the idea of how he was making movies in the 70s. But to his filmmaking style, no one filmed New York as dirty or grittier or 1970s than Larry Cohen did. Maybe Scorsese and Schrader, but outside of that, Larry Cohen had the pulse of New York.
Yeah, because there's something even sort of grittier in these films, in this film, than
for sure,
Mean Streets or Taxi Driver. I mean,
so this movie starts off, and the whole premise is that there's a slew of randomized killings in New York, and the movie starts off with a man on a water tower just shooting people in the streets, and Ted LaBianca, who is a New York City detective, is tasked with finding out what's going on, and he is the person who's he arrives at the scene. We know that he's a stand-up do-good cop because he gets up there, and before the SWAT team can take him out, he takes off his tie, he takes off his gun, he takes off his coat, and he climbs up to the water tower to try to reason with this 21-year-old, the oldest 21-year-old looking person in the history of cinema.
Everybody looks so fucking old in this film. I mean, and then Ted LaBianca says, "I'm 34," and I'm like, right. Fucking hell.
Right. You look like you're 63, sir.
Like, I'm glad I quit drinking. Oh my God.
Right. And he's a cop that has a beautiful overview of Central Park. Like, it's just an amazing view of Central Park as he's sitting there.
Salaries?
But
it's rent control.
He gets up to the top of the water tower and is talking to this young gentleman about why he's seemingly cohesive, and he asks him why he performed all these murders, he shot all these people, and he just says, "God told me to." And that kicks off a slew of other killings, randomized killings in New York, and as at the end of it, right before they're either captured or they die, all of the perpetrators say, "God told me to."
They also never run away.
They never run away. They stay with their So this is as one would when you were told by God to do something. You would assume that you're in there. You would assume that you're in the right, and you would stay there.
Sorry not to cut you off, but one of the creepiest scenes was the father that killed his family, calmly explaining, "Well, he's done so much for me and done so much for us that who am I to refuse him this one thing?" And they're happy, right? They're better off, so of course they're with him.
And the other thing that he says in that scene is where Ted LaBianca's like, "Are you a religious man?" He's like, "Not until recently."
Not until recently.
Which basically means not until right before I killed my family.
Before God told me to do it. But that was one of the more disturbing.
So anyway, we go through the whole process where Ted LaBianca is starting to lose his sanity, and basically his superiors start to think that he's causing this chaos, and that his obsession with it, and that his leaking it to the press is starting to cause these kind of copycat murders, in which he actually does, which is a really kind of a brilliant move of the movie, where we see a low-level gangster start to take the "God told me to" premise and start to use it to his own benefit. The movie takes a hard tonal shift about halfway through when we start to when we meet the character that people associate to God and who's telling them to do these things. And
but before that, we meet that character's, or we hear the story of that character's mother.
That's true. Right? That is true.
And that mother and we hear it kind of secondhand from a guy that somehow picked her up on the side of the road. She was out on Long Island, right? And running in the rain naked, or running in the cold naked, and this guy picks her up. And as he tells the cop, right, he's not beyond sort of stepping out, right, of his marriage, but puts a coat on her, and she starts to explain.
He was honorable this time.
He was honorable this time. She explains
about how she had a virgin birth, and that the baby was given up to a good Catholic family. And then, so Ted LaBianca, when he's talking to these people, he starts talking, and he starts to realize a pattern of everyone who's committing these murders, or people who are around him, recognize this character, but they can't make out his face, or they can't remember his face. Eventually, he finds this person and confronts them, and it turns out, and again, this is up for interpretation, so I'm interested in your interpretation as well, that it's possible that God and Jesus aren't the only entities that were born of virgin births, and that they're not the only, that they're basically a superior being, and they're not from this earth. And it turns out that Ted LaBianca, lo and behold, is also of a virgin birth, which is why he was so inexplicably drawn to this. And there's a side rib vagina thing that's going on, and it gets very, very bizarre. And it's kind of devolves into madness as the movie goes on. And Ted LaBianca, and we follow Ted LaBianca's character into that madness, essentially. So he starts to figure out that this character is some sort of alien presence, whether or not it's actually truly the God that created this earth or not is to be, I guess, could be discussed. But clearly the one that's here in New York City is one of many. And obviously Ted LaBianca is potentially one of those as well.
Right. Because we kind of get the hint or the illusion that these women who gave birth to the mind-controlling entity, right, that led people to kill everybody else, and Ted LaBianca's character, that their mothers were abducted by aliens and somehow impregnated.
Which, to be fair, makes as much sense as most of these stories.
Right, as anything else. He is a religious man. LaBianca, he's a devout Catholic, right?
Right.
So devout that he won't get a divorce from Sandy Dennis, Oscar winner Sandy Dennis, right? He won't get a divorce from her to marry his younger, beautiful model. I mean, she was a model in real life,
yes,
right?
Yes,
girlfriend. But he continues to visit.
But he lies to her, saying that he will get him the divorce.
Right. Even though he won't.
And then he goes to confession to confess the lie that he's told his girlfriend about not divorcing his wife.
I mean, one of my things with this film was like, what are we saying about religion? What are we saying about sort of like what is a holy and what isn't? And are we looking for, this will sound offensive, are we looking for stories to help explain stories? Are we looking for, well, this is how I can explain God, aliens? And it's like, I don't know that says anything about why we do the things or why we believe what we believe.
I think this movie is a very interesting take on religious mass hysteria and this idea that it can justify whatever we want it to justify. I'm not 100% sure that's what Larry Cohen set out to do. I think Larry Cohen sets out to make movies and he'll throw together scripts on the fly, and a lot of this was most likely ad-libbed. Obviously, the people flopping in the streets were not told how to get shot.
It was great, though. It was just brilliant. I love that part. Like the guy riding the bicycle next to the taxi all of a sudden gets shot. Just like, oh my God. It's like, but again, like I love it because you know that it's just happening. The taxi drivers are like, what just happened there?
This guerrilla style filmmaking that he puts together. Yeah. And this is a guy who, if you give him $1, he's going to stretch it to $5, and he's probably going to make 3. He's probably going to shoot 3 different movies at the same time that he's making this one, and use footage in other ones. Yeah. And I love, you don't see that anymore really, and I love that he was kind of a pioneer. And like, if you go and look at his filmography, his influences and his script writing are all over the place. I mean, like as far as whom he's influenced moving forward. And it's just, I don't think that's another guy that, again, talking about Anguish and how it's not as well known. I think Larry Cohen, I think people recognize certain numbers of his films, but like we really should be doing more to kind of talk about who this guy was.
I wish this wouldn't have delved into the supernatural extraterrestrial stuff. I would have been much more interested, I think, and invested if it had stuck with the religious aspect. And this, and I mean, coming from mind control. I mean, because as the film goes on, right, Ted LaBianca's character starts to be able to control minds, right, as well, like our sort of no-name blonde-haired character who looks kind of like Jesus, or I'm sorry, looks kind of like the Jesus depicted on like most accepted sort of, the pale white-skinned blue-eyed guy from the Middle East. Sure, I would have been much more, I think, compelled and sort of like really into it if he would have stuck there. I just thought that kind of swerve into, it does feel like it's kind of 2 or 3 scripts cobbled together, and I get the trying to explain, finding reasons to explain this or explain that, because it can't just be a religious thing. It has to be.
In his defense, I don't think he was setting out to. I think he was setting out to make a movie to get butts into seats, and so like the whole idea of God told me to, and like it's gonna be this horror film that is going to come up with some sort of solution. I think if this is remade, you let the LaBianca character start to believe in his own Messiah complex, start to believe that he's actually is causing this mass hysteria, and then really kind of explore that aspect of it. That's obviously the more interesting and more polished story. This is not Cohen's first movie. This is first movie gets released because his second movie actually gets shelved. It's Alive gets shelved for a minute and gets pushed back. I forget there was a I read why there was, but It's Alive gets pushed and gets released first. I'm sorry, It's Alive gets released after this one. I think a filmmaker that has a bigger budget and has more time on his hands would probably have told that story.
Yeah.
But I think you'll find with a lot of Coen films is that he had 2 weeks and $1 million, and he had to blow through it and get a film get it in can, right?
Yeah,
I mean, so it's.
Well, I think there's a reading of this where I think I could do another textual reading of this film and find the subversiveness in that swerve, right? So it's not that I want to dismiss it. I think I think if I looked at it through a different lens, I could probably find a more interesting take on that alien swerve. I just don't want to.
And it's probably best just to let it be what it is.
Right. It does not need. I do not need to sort of like intellectualize or philosophize on too deep of a level with.
Right. Once you get to the close up of the underarm vagina, then at that point you're like,
and I'm just kind of like, how's that?
And then when the Jesus character is inviting Ted LaBianco to like then propagate, they want to procreate and create their own like race, and it was cool. It was really cool. This was a video box rental for me when I was a kid. So like when I was in high school, God Told Me To was one of those. It was a great like this scary face looking over the Empire. Maybe it might have been the Twin Towers. But looking down on New York and just God Told Me To. It's such a great. I mean, I think it's been released as other things, but God Told Me To is such a great title for a movie, especially in the 70s.
No, it is a great title, and these are the kind of movies that I remember as a kid, like walking through. So there was a video store real close to me called Take One Video, and they had like a lot of these like schlocky kind of like movies like this, right, or all the Ghoulies movies and stuff like that. But I remember these kind of covers. So I mean, there's a sense of nostalgia in these films too that I really kind of dig, even though they're not what I was going to rent. But
sure,
but it's just that memory of like walking through there.
So the last point on God Told Me To, in I think it was the early 2000s, maybe late 1990s, a young, I want to say, I don't know if he's German or not, Austrian filmmaker was obsessed with this movie and came up to Larry Cohen and asked him to remake it. Nothing came of it, but you want to take a guess at who that might have been?
Michael Haneke?
Gaspar Noé. I don't know if I could be getting his nationality wrong, but Gaspar Noé wanted to remake God Told Me To. I still want him to.
Yeah,
I want to see his take on God Told Me To.
I feel like there would be some like, underarm like
right.
actual like
this is a Cronenberg, right? There's a lot more than just underarm vaginas.
Well, I'm glad I watched that. Okay, next one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Your vice is a locked door, and only I have the key. These giallo films are just so sweaty and horny, right?
This is the sexiest movie I made us watch.
They're sweaty, horny. Nobody's good. Everybody gets punished.
God Told Me To is a great horror film title. Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key is a fucking stellar movie title.
It's so good. I was like, wait, what? Like, I kept trying to go, Your Voice. I'm like, no, it says Vice. I know it says Vice.
And it has nothing really to do with the movie.
No, okay. I was going to ask about that title. Like, is it because this film is based off of the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Black Cat. I think that's the title,
loosely,
right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, loosely. So, and there are a lot of like similar beats, not just that there's a black cat in each of the things, but
the movie that Martino made before this one, Sergio Martino, the director of this movie, that was a quote in the movie, and they ended up using it as the title of this movie.
I read
it's loosely tied, but again, it's not a sequel, and people thought it was a sequel because it said that, but it's not.
Okay.
I think he just liked those words put together, and why wouldn't you? Yeah. And used it as the title of a movie.
But this is just wild. I mean, I know that sexploitation is a thing in like movies, but man, this is just wild. I mean, from like the very beginning, this like opening like scene of like hippies drinking with this like deadbeat author.
But over the credits, still, you've got a very like blurred out sex scene that happens over the entirety of the credits. That has nothing to do with the rest of the film. Nothing whatsoever. I mean, there could be two characters. You can't see who the characters are. They're just people rolling around in sheets having sex over the credits. And then, you dive right in. That's what I love about these giallo films is that they don't take time to There's no exposition. They don't take time to set it. You're thrown into it. This is either a sink or swim experience, and if you don't like that type of movie, you're going to hate all giallos. You're going to hate them all because none of them really make a whole hell of a lot of sense.
No,
there's not a through. I mean, this one probably makes the most amount of sense out of a lot of them, to be quite fair.
Yeah,
but
because I mean, like the plots within, or not the plots, but the sort of plots by like bad characters. You can see those sort of machinations kind of like working, right? So like in this film anyway, that did make sense, and it did kind of like you just wanted to see like what's going to happen here. Like, why is he watching them have sex? That's weird, and she knows it. And yeah,
so did you want to? So you picked the card. You're going to have to give us the plot.
Oh fuck. Okay. So the story centers around
Claudio,
the author, right? So
yes.
Wait. Okay. So this kind of washed up, never really has been, but wants to be writer, and his wife, and they live in this Italian villa in this small town, and it's her money, right? Don't they live off her money?
It's his money. It's his mother's money.
Okay. Oh, right. Okay. So it's his mother's money because she's in the painting of in the villa. So, in the film opens with this big kind of like party scene with these like hippies that live kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Michael Chabon kind of like where people are like, you're this old recluse writer who did one thing one time a long time ago.
Right.
His books are no longer published, but all these people still love him. He's got money, and so he's holding these
and booze. He's got tons of booze.
Yeah, and so he's holding these parties at his manor that are just full of food and liquor and wild sex. and just free love and music and what have you.
Except he's a complete dick.
Right. And he's become so jaded by it all and so like hateful of it that he can't even enjoy it.
Right. So it's this, so I mean, and he immediately sort of abuses his wife in front of all these people, like forces her to drink like a big old like goblet of like wine or whatever.
So everyone's discarded wine. He puts into a big bowl and makes her drink it.
Yeah. And then he sort of molests the maid in front of her.
Right. Very racist segment of the movie.
Extremely racist because
like to the
what
point
he
where
says, but it's just like
colored and Negro end up being thrown around in the dialogue. Of course, this is a 1970s movie. Not to excuse it.
Don't excuse them. Yeah. Don't. Well, it was a different time.
That's just how giallos are raised.
Yes. So like his wife storms out if she leaves, right? All this other stuff is going on, and I forget. Everyone leaves, and he ends up sort of naked with the maid, or the maid is naked next to him on the like settee.
The way that the wife shows that she has agency is she comes back and wears his mother's dress, and so he's what's the word I'm looking for? His mother is a huge influence, and she's passed away. Both her and her father, his father, passed away, but he still has this huge painting of her and her favorite cat. Her cat still lives with them. That'll become a plot point later, and he has a huge oil painting of her, and he has this dress that he doesn't like anyone else to wear, but then he also has sex with people who do wear it, insinuating that he had some sort of an amorous relationship with his mother,
if not just a weird fetish.
Right.
So the wife comes out in the dress, and he more or less rapes her at that point.
Right.
I mean, it's not a consensual sort of thing.
Right. I think she knows that it's coming, but and so she's. I mean, yes,
she also does it to piss him off, and again, like to show a kind of agency, to show a kind of power. Like, I know that this will annoy you, but I also know that I'll get a kind of
retribution. For it as well. Yeah.
And then they kind of do husband and wife things. They go to town, right? He picks up some books from the bookstore. Well, it turns out he's sleeping with the bookstore lady as well, right? And
the clerk at the bookstore. So he's a philanderer, and it's a well-known.
If you haven't noticed it yet.
Right. He's a well-known philanderer. His wife knows that he does it. He even brags about it, that his wife knows that he does it, to the policemen that eventually show up.
Because his bookstore lady fling ends up dead.
Right.
In some weird garage?
She gets they were supposed to meet up for the night. He ended up getting drunk and passing out.
Right.
She ends up going to the place where they were supposed to meet, and she ends up getting killed with like this sickle. Very giallo type blood and ketchup kind of murder.
Super bright red.
Right. And so she dies. The police come to the house the next day to basically question the author. And he tells them that exact same story, that he never met up with her and that he had gotten drunk. But yes, he was sleeping with her, and he's very sad that it all happened.
Yeah.
Moving forward, he starts to have sex with the maid, and the maid also ends up dead.
But she puts on the dress. But
he makes her put on the dress, and then he has sex with her then. And
there's this weird scene where the maid is hearing things, and she runs up the stairs away from the sound, and then she
ends up getting killed
by the sickle again. And
so Claudio knows that he had nothing to do with it, but he thinks that the police will also believe that he killed, because two of his acquaintances have been killed. So he convinces his wife Octavia to board up the maid in the wall in their manor.
In the wine cellar.
In the wine cellar, yes. So there's a hole in the wine cellar. They basically brick it up and they hide her there. And then from there, the movie continues.
And his niece comes to town, right? It's his niece.
It's his niece.
And so they get a letter from the niece that she's going to be on the train. They go to the train to meet the train. They're like, oh, just like niece, right? She's not on the train.
She's not on the train like she said she was
comes
supposed to be.
Pulling up in a convertible with some dude, right? And what does she say? Like, oh, he was going this way. But again, there's insinuation that she is
a free spirit.
A free spirit. I was going to say
and also sexually active.
Sexually active. But there you go.
Loose, I guess, is what you'd say. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say of loose morals, but then I was just thinking about, would that be what Justin Long would say in House of Darkness? Maybe that's not exactly what I meant, or that's not the preferred nomenclature. I'm not.
My three sisters, we're not going to kill you. It's fine. This is not how this podcast ends.
That's okay. Good.
This podcast is not actually happening. This is all in your head. You're stuck in a dungeon somewhere.
So the niece.
To be very apropos.
The niece gets there and she recognizes that this marriage is terrible and that Octavia is miserable. So she takes her side, empathizes with her. Right? She starts a flirtation with the milkman. Is that what he is? He's a milkman who's also a dirt bike racer in real life, right? That's his real passion.
Right.
So she starts a flirtation there. There is a kind of, I think, strained flirtation between herself and Claudio, but she ends up first in bed with Octavia.
Yes.
Right?
And then with the motorcycle racer.
And then,
but while Claudio is actually watching,
right.
And she tells Claudio that, of course, I saw you watching, then I wanted it to be you.
Right.
So then she ends up having sex with Claudio.
Right. So there's just sex everywhere.
Everybody is doing it in this movie. That's why I gave it to you, Brock, is that this was a horny movie.
Thank you.
People need sexy sex time going on all the time.
And I was like, this all seems very plausible.
Right.
Just people can fuck whoever they want to fuck. I don't care, right? This is great, right? And that's why giallos are great.
Right. When you envision Italy, isn't that what you envision? Just hot people.
Well, it used to be until the new kind of uprising of fascism. Sure. I don't think that fascists are allowed to have sex.
Everything's cyclical. It just happens occasionally.
Okay, all right. I mean,
the pendulum swings. We're back.
Yeah, I don't like to think about Mussolini having sex, but this niece, she's into it. But also we find out that she has her own kind of ulterior motives. So
everyone's screwing everyone literally
and figuratively, right? So Octavia's like, I've had enough, right? She ends up killing Claudio one night when he's drunk at his typewriter, if I remember right.
So Claudio, now that the niece is there, he's seen what young, invigorating woman can do for his life, and he's tired of his wife.
His wife, by the way, is very attractive and very beautiful, we should say. And
it's very hard to understand. I would say that Claudio is using this because he's being egged on by the niece, and he's using this as to reinvigorate his writing. So he starts to write a new novel, which is about him killing his wife and boarding her up in the wall. Well, Octavia reads this, and out of fear for her own safety, takes a pair of scissors and stabs Claudio. She then employs the niece to drag the body down. Who had seen him, yes. Right. Who had seen her kill him to put him in the hole.
Doesn't Claudio tell the niece about the maid? Isn't that part of how, that whole thing? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Claudio's in the wall. Claudio's in the wall because they're just going to play it off that he ran away, essentially.
Because it's not going to start to smell.
It's a wine cellar. Those don't smell. Then Octavia employs, it's the milkman, right? Who does she, this is where I get lost a little bit.
To move the maid?
No.
Oh, wait, no.
To throw the oil onto the ground, throw the oil slick to kill the niece and the motorcycle rider so that no one knows what she did. There was a silver-haired guy that I got completely lost. And
so he was there. He was there with her. I mean, he's teamed up with Octavia. Right.
So but how did they connect? That's where I got lost.
I have no idea how they connected.
Okay.
Right? But the niece, in a way, sort of throws a spanner in the works here, right? Because
well, now she knows. Now she knows that Claudio's.
But her just showing up, right? Because I mean, if I understand it right, the wife and the silver-haired guy had this plan already in place. The niece comes to town. It's like, oh no, right? Now we've got this other thing to do.
Because the plan could be that Claudia had killed his lover and killed the maid, and then ran off, knowing that he'd be caught for it, and then Octavia, the ultimate goal here is Octavia is
free.
After. Well, she's free free from Claudio, but she's also after his family money. Essentially.
Right. And this comes back to the niece because the niece is like, I saw this, like it's fine. You know what? I really just wanted the jewelry anyway, right? I wanted Claudio's mother's jewelry anyway. And Octavia's like, okay, cool. Let's have sex one more time, and then you can leave. And then she leaves with the dirt bike guy, right? And then that's when
but Octavia's partner throws oil onto the ground and the right near a very sexy billboard so that the motorcycle guy is distracted. He does not see the oil slick and kills them both. And so Octavia has won. Yay!
Except,
but lo and behold, we've left out the entirety of the cat named Satan.
Could you be any more?
No, right. There's a cat named Satan that was Claudio's mother's cat. Very beloved. Claudio was friendly with it. But Octavia also held doves. She had a cage full of doves, and at various points, Satan has been giving Octavia the side eye, and it's always kind of there when murders happen, and it plays the Poe cat role,
right?
And so at one point, Satan ends up killing Octavia's doves. Octavia grabs the same scissors that she killed Claudio with and very violently stabs Satan in the eye. And she is seen, and her undoing is because of a poor bag lady who
takes the recycling.
Basically,
yeah.
She saw Octavia stab the cat. She reports that to the police. The police are like, you know what? Not a big deal, but we got to check it out because someone reported it.
Right.
This is after everything's been dead. Everyone's walled up. Octavia's won. She's ready to bask in her wealth, and the cops are at her door. And unfortunately, the cops hear the cat
meowing because she walled him up with her husband's body.
And so the cops find the hole in the wall, and now Octavia's on the hook for everyone's murders.
Yeah. Everyone gets punished. Everyone's terrible.
Everyone's dead.
Everyone screws each other, literally,
and then fiend. Just from the title alone, I love this movie. Yeah. I wouldn't say it's the best giallo that exists. There's the What Happened to Solange is probably one of my favorite ones. And then of course you got Argento and all the there's a whole slew of them. But this one in particular, where it really is just people, just like gorgeous people jumping into bed with one another, like every other scene. This would have been a film that, as a teenager, had I seen it, I would have just stolen the tape. I would have never given it back because, not to surprise anyone out here, but teenage boys
like boobs,
yeah,
and there are boobs in this movie,
and there are boobs in horror films. So I would go and rent horror films because I don't know if I just thought that my parents weren't savvy to what was actually going on, but I would rent horror films because in the first half an hour you typically got to see boobs in horror films, and then after the killing started, then boobs went away because people got scared.
Well, in this, stabbing is a metaphor anyway.
But in this movie, the boobs really never go away.
They're just there the entire time. I mean, from like minute one, they're just in your face.
Right. Yeah. As soon as the movie starts, it's sex, and then.
But it's drinking and sex and murder. Right?
But it really is. This is kind of what I blame Heart of Darkness, House of Darkness. I don't want to confuse those two movies. This could have been a very simple 30-minute Tales from the Crypt as well. I mean, and I'm 100% sure that it exists as a Tales from the Crypt, but the stretching it out and adding all of the layers of just the intimacy and the just all of
subterfuge and
I just
intrigue.
Because again, if you give yourself over to this movie, and I know we've ruined it to a certain extent, but like when you're watching this movie, like let it sit for a minute and then go back to it. Yeah. It's on Shudder. Like it's fun to realize, oh, okay, this is all what's going to happen, and oh shit, oh the cat. It's like it's just so delicious, and I feel like it's really, really well done to the point where like I forgive all of it for like the plot holes and the kind of fumbling around it and the basic storyline, just because it's so much fun to watch and it's so pretty to watch and horny to watch too.
Well, right. I was going to say most people coming to this film, especially if they go to it after listening to us, are not going to care about the plot. They're just going to be like, where are the boobs? I've devolved into like a crass, like 13-year-old.
We're going to get a lot of comments of like, dear Brock and Jason.
Could you stop saying boobs?
I thought that there were going to be way more boobs. You guys led me to believe there were going to be way more boobs.
But no, but they're just like, they never go away.
No, they don't.
But it also, like, everyone's gorgeous.
Right.
Everyone is just gorgeous in this film.
Yeah, Claudio's good looking. The motorcycle guy's good looking.
They're all good looking. Yeah, and I mean, even the cops have this sense of virility, right? And sort of the way that in presence, right? And I found that as fascinating as, well, I mean, not as fascinating as the boobs, but as fascinating as anything else, kind of in the story. I mean, because it really just is about like a group of hot people just screwing each other over,
right? And with nothing better, they're affluent enough with nothing better to do than to just try to one up each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, I don't think that's a new concept in movies.
No,
but it's always fun to watch.
Absolutely,
it's always fun to watch.
All right, a girl walks home alone at night. So the premise of this movie is we're watching the citizens of a small town called Bad City. And our hero is a James Dean-esque drug dealer, but with a heart of gold.
Well, he becomes a drug dealer. He's not a drug dealer at first. We don't really know what he does, right?
I thought he
steals the drug dealer's drugs, and then he becomes
okay, I mistake. I thought he was working for him beforehand. Okay, so
because the father, sorry to step over this, but like the father is the drug dealer's customer,
right?
And so because remember he picks up the kid in the car.
Yes, we're watching the citizens of this small town called Bad City, and we are introduced to a young Iranian boy who's kind of down on his luck. He's poor, but he's saved up and he's gotten things that make him happy. He has a beautiful Thunderbird that he drives, a vintage Thunderbird that he drives. He dresses like James Dean, has a pompadour. But very quickly we're introduced to all the bad people of Bad City. So he goes home and his dad is a heroin addict, and his beloved Thunderbird gets stolen as payment to the local pimp / drug dealer. And all along, he works as a gardener / odd jobs guy with a local rich girl in town. And so that kind of sets our story up. And then, of course, we have a girl, we enter in a girl, and her character's only called Girl, who is a vampire that is basically this is very much a spaghetti western, A Man with No Name. This is a Clint Eastwood movie if it's made in the 70s.
It's a spaghetti vampire show.
Right. And so she comes into town and is there to really clean things up in a sense. And it's ultimately a woman's story where she's there to protect the women who are being put upon by the bad men in this town. The pimp is, obviously he's painted with broad strokes. He's got sex tattooed across his neck.
It's so cool. So cool.
So black and white comic book, a spaghetti western film, great music, great score, very stylistically filmed. And so our hero and the vampire, so through a series of events, the vampire ends up killing the drug dealer. Our hero gets his car back, stumbles across a stash of money and drugs. Mm-hmm. that he uses to help his father wean himself off of drugs, but also then he starts selling drugs to local. He starts selling X to the local rich girl. That's basically that's where he wants to be.
Right.
He sees this money as a way out of Bad City. And the pretty girl that he works for is seen as an out to that. So he goes to a club to sell some drugs to them, dressed as it was a costume party, I guess, and he's dressed as Dracula. Mm-hmm. The girls give him X. He starts to trip. He goes outside, and there he meets Girl. Girl is obviously brought to him because he looks like Dracula, and
he seems like a bad guy.
Right, and he seems like a bad guy. So her whole intent is to protect women, and she's very ominous throughout the movie. She follows around a little boy and basically tells him to be good
and threatens him.
Right. Yeah. She follows around the women as well. She follows around a prostitute, but only there to protect her, even though the prostitute doesn't actually know that at the time. She ends up, like I said, killing the drug dealer, and it's really. It's hypnotic and it's methodical and it's just stylistic and it's just mesmerizing. The movie doesn't really have that much of a plot, really. I mean, it's not. It's that's as simple as that. The boy meets girl.
Boy meets girl. They go away. I mean, they get out of town.
They get out of Bad City. They're able to escape
because the girl ends up killing his father. Right?
Because he forced the prostitute to do heroin, and so the prostitute's tripping. Or she's high, and she comes in and sees that the father has
kills the father. The prostitute gets like freaked out. She says, "Yeah, get out of here!" And then the prostitute gives Girl the cat, who the father believes is his like wife.
Right.
And so like the boy finds out that she did this because he sees the cat like with the girl.
Right. And the boy has to make a crisis. He has a crisis of conscience whether or not he wants to go with the girl that killed his dad and or still leave town.
But he does.
He does ultimately because I think he understood, like he hated his father anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew his father was a bad man. So he knew what that situation
and he was only kind of holding him back and down as well.
Right.
So.
In fact, he gives his father the stash of cash and the drugs just to go off and kill himself and to leave and to be, to not be a part of his life.
Throws him out. I mean, what I loved about this movie was the style. Was this kind of, this black and white, hyper stylized. So it's got this like film noir, spaghetti western, but still a vampire film. Right? And some of the camera shots, some of like the tracking dolly shots were just so interesting. But I think on a theoretical level, something else I found really interesting was the director's commentary on how many different types of vampires there are like in the world. That a vampire is a teacher, a pimp, a regular working boy, a father, a family member, right? All of these people can be vampires, historians, right? I'm thinking of this being set in, a fictional sort of Bad City, Iran.
Right.
And you can't, that's the other thing, any film set in Iran right now, you can't help but think about all the stuff going on with women protests.
True.
And the morality police and how that ties into a movie like this as well. And how these other people are sort of, life-sucking entities.
Right. Well, and it's interesting, too, and I know I say that a lot on the podcast, but so this movie was shot in California, but based in Iran,
right?
And filmed with mostly Iranian expats. But what's one of a cool character trait of Girl is she wears the headdress every time that she goes out. So she's still part of that trapping as well, even though you've got people who don't. The prostitute certainly doesn't. The rich girls don't. But and again, this universe that you see for a very brief period of time, it just is so. I want to live in that. I want to go and delve in. I want to know. Like I would love. And again, I know that would ruin it. but a backstory on her, because I don't get the feeling that she's been a vampire for very long. If you look in her room and the people and the concerts that she's seen and the places she's been to and the music that she listens to, you get the idea that this is a new thing for her, and this is the headdress is also a cape for her. So she's the superhero in this story where she's trying to protect the people who can't protect themselves or who've been. It really is. It's so you're drawn in by how beautifully it's shot.
It's so lush.
Yeah. It's crazy.
I love black and white films like that still maintain this sort of sensuousness in the.
You don't get the feel that the black and white is being used to hide low budget, or that was a stylistic choice that was made specifically for a reason, but it wasn't because we're trying to hide the misgivings, or we're trying to shoot in times where we wouldn't have the budgetary limitations of licenses and things like that.
I just saw the movie Holy Spider.
I haven't seen it.
As part of because it's not out yet, because I saw it at a film festival.
Look at you,
Jason.
Look at you.
Same director that did The Border.
Okay.
But it is set in Iran, in a holy city of Mashhad, and one of the holiest cities with, like, I think, is it the biggest mosque in Iran? But it's based on a true story of a man that was going around killing prostitutes in the city, because the city also has the most or the highest level of prostitution. So, I mean, your ironic juxtaposition there notwithstanding, this forms a kind of interesting, almost like double feature in sort of how women are protected or not protected, right? Or who is there to protect women, because the story about this guy going and killing prostitutes, like, no one wanted to catch him. Right. They were just kind of like, it's fine. Like, okay.
Well, because they're less than people, right?
Right. So,
and they're also to want to catch. I mean, I've spent some time in the Middle East and to experience stories like these. To want to catch that person, you would have to admit to what he's doing, and to admit that these women are people, are human, that are worth saving, and that the acts that they're doing aren't because they're being forced to do them. And again, not to denigrate an entire. This happens everywhere, but in these hyper religious areas, you have a tendency where law is based on a lot of laws based on their religion. You also then juxtapose that with capitalism and money, and a lot of that. So I've spent some time in Dubai. A lot of you go to bars and there are prostitutes everywhere, and it's not like you think. It's not like slimy New York City prostitutes. And again, I shouldn't.
Well, Times Square hasn't been that way in a long time.
But I meant that from a movie perspective, right?
Yeah.
This is not that. This is, you go to a bar and all of a sudden a woman will be talking to you, and at some point during the conversation, money will come up. It's just a weird phenomenon, right? But it's one of those things where we have these laws that and I know this happens everywhere, but you have these laws where you look the other way because there's commerce involved. But yes, when it comes down to protection for these women, especially in these types of places, I totally see that.
Yeah, and there is this moment in Holy Spider where two journalists go to meet one of the cleric legislators of the city and kind of confront him on this. Like, well, how do you kind of think about these lives? And he's like, oh, every life is important. So, right. I mean, but there is that, and you sort of know that there's talking out of both sides of the mouth too. Yeah, I thought that these were kind of an interesting kind of conversation piece, these two films, because I think part of what A Girl Walks Home at Night is sort of saying is like, sometimes you need to watch out for the girl who walks home alone at night, because and that's the title. That's the point of the title of this film, is that, she's the trouble. She's the danger. Right? She is the thing that will kind of get you. She's the protector. Right. And she's kind of the only protector here.
The introduction of the American aesthetic with the James Dean and the bringing in that iconic Americana into this is it's interesting to see how that plays in with what she's trying to say there as well. How much that influence of this desire for money and for Western things has also influenced or spoken to the Iranian experience.
We are now going through a Marxist lens on this podcast, but no, because I think really what you're saying
is about time. Is episode 3. Come on.
It is that American style capitalism too, right? So it's not just the James Dean dress, right? It's not, but it's the car,
right? It's the Ford Thunderbird.
It's
the white shirt and it's the blue jeans. It's the pompadour.
Everything's for money, right? I've got mine. It's the pimp drug dealer's apartment, all of the kind of or what he thinks is like cool and what women like, right? Big TV, his dance moves. It's brilliant, by the way, right? Yes. The kind of club music playing on. So it is. Was there Coca-Cola anywhere? There might as well have been.
Right. And there probably couldn't have been just because of product placement.
Licensing, right? But yeah, it is that kind of that sense of capitalism, that sense of I want to be there. I want to be the rich girl that lives in that house. How do I get there?
And she's the one also, she just had a nose job.
Right.
So you've got that aesthetic where she's also then altering herself to fit some sort of other ideal.
Well, idealized beauty, right? The image that she's told is beautiful from magazines, from fashion magazines, from maybe it's not American fashion magazines, but it's
well, aren't
European.
They watching TV and he's asking her, isn't that what you want?
Right. Yeah. Yes.
This wonderful debut film for this director. I did not like Bad Batch.
I was going to ask, have you seen her new one?
I have not seen Mona Lisa
and the Blood Moon. I haven't either.
It's on my list. I want to, and maybe we can discuss it next episode, but I want to see it. I have not. It just came out. And so, but I was very, very excited to see the Bad Batch. And again, I'd have to go back and revisit it. I don't remember much about it. I just remember being very, very disappointed by it all. Which is okay. I mean, that happens. This movie stands alone as just.
She did some TV work.
Yeah, and she's had some problematic social media stuff as well.
Right.
I don't remember all the details.
Yeah.
It's not really worth going into.
No. But I'm the same. This was I really enjoyed this. We'll always have this.
We will always have this.
All right. Next time we will be talking about, in some particular order, road games.
Yes, the first exploitation film.
Part of the Australian New Wave, right? So road games, Time Crimes, Cure,
Goodnight Mommy,
and Kuroneko.
Yes.
So
in no particular order.
In no particular order, we will save the folded up squares of legal paper and legal pad paper on the table. I'll take them home with me and bring them back. But yeah, so that'll be next time. Next time, we'll also be talking about, I think, in more detail, right? Let the Right One In?
Yeah, so the next episode you hear, we'll also be talking about the Fort Worth Film Club screening of Let the Right One In, which again happens on October 26th at Stage West, 7:30 p.m., 7 o'clock, the doors open. Free to the public. If you're here in the area, please come out and see it with us. We'll have a discussion of the film afterwards as well. I'm probably going to watch the remake just to juxtapose it as well, and I'm probably watching the remake of Goodnight Mommy as well, just to see, because it's Naomi Watts, and I want to see. I've heard bad things, but I'm interested to see my take on remakes, just as a hot button point before we have to leave. If you're going to remake a film, filmmakers out there, do not call it the same title. Call it something else, and then people will go, "Hey, that's a lot like Goodnight Mommy," but it was called Hello Brother.
Hello kids.
It was called What Happened to Solange.
I'm not a huge remake fan, period. I will watch them too. I tried to watch the remake of Let the Right One In, so I'll go back and do that. I'll watch I like Naomi Watts. I'm a Naomi Watts fan.
I have a feeling that if you hadn't have watched the originals, that both of those films would probably been fine. I remember the Matthew Vaughn Let Me In version, thinking, okay, it's not that, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
I don't know about Goodnight Mommy. I'm very excited to talk about the other films, though.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Well, with that,
until next time.
Until next time, guys. See you. You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time.